Good Friday afternoon and welcome to Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles and I am your host for this Friday afternoon, coming to you live from the Rio Grande Valley, Harlingen, Texas to be exact, of South Texas. And joining me today in the program, we have San Diego correspondent Salvador Rivera. We have Julian Resendez reporting out of El Paso. Julian, we're going to check in with you in just a little bit. Salvador, I wanted to start with you because, and we are having some video technical difficulties, but I wanted to start with you because there's some news about some protesters clashing with officers in Los Angeles last night. Fill us in on that.
Well, as you know, there's demonstrations have been going on since June. On a daily basis, we have seen the National Guard being called in, the Marines that were called in by President Trump to Los Angeles to try to put down, for lack of a better term, these demonstrations. Now, yesterday afternoon, we saw federal agents who have been outside the federal building in downtown Los Angeles. They literally walked across the street and approach a group of demonstrators who has been there for weeks on a sidewalk and doing their public duty. They have been demonstrating peacefully. And yesterday we saw the officers who walked across the street and started grabbing them, tossing them onto the street, arresting them. There was a young lady who did videotape the whole scene. You could hear her saying, "You're on live. You walked across the street. You are attacking people." And that is what happened. Apparently, the federal agents just got tired of seeing them or hearing these protesters. And finally, for some unknown reason, they decided to walk across the street and put an end to this gathering that had been there on a consistent basis for weeks. But this is one example of demonstrations that have been going on in Los Angeles since June. And I want to introduce right now Francisco Chavo Romero, who has been at the forefront of these demonstrations. He is with LA Unión del Barrio, and he's been instrumental in the demonstrations. So, Chavo, do you call them demonstrations, protests, riots? How would you term them?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Just a few things here for clarification. You know what? Well, we are waging organized resistance, and there is a spectrum that is taking place. Some is organized resistance that, like, for example, Nevada is carrying out, and we have certain actions, demonstrations, protests, press conferences, etc. And we're working within the bounds of what's left of this little paper called the Constitution of the United States, right? And then local and state policy and laws, because we don't want to give the state the pretext to come and capture us, which they have been attempting to do. We also want to flip the language around protesters clashing with like authorities, etc. It's the reverse. It's authorities or other mercenary types that are provoking and attacking violently our people. We want to dispel, for example, this 700% increase in attacks, so-called attacks against federal officers. Well, the political violence that's taking place is because the very nature of this war that's being waged against our community is violent. And so the political violence is in kind to that violence being perpetrated against our people. And I'll say,
who is participating in this demonstration?
The spectrum is wide. So you have forces like ourselves that are waging organized resistance. You also have community members. I mean, the question we always ask: imagine if you're walking down the street and a masked kidnapper comes out of nowhere, takes your mom off of your shoulder and trying to take her into a van. What would you do, right? So kind of put yourself in that situation, right? And then finally, this spelling of that increase of the 700% attacks against federal agents. Well, that's because there's a 10,000% increase in the violent nature, aggressiveness, and brutality that our people are facing. So it's all in kind, as we say.
Chavo, but what is the message, and what was the reason you started doing these demonstrations, these events, actions as you call them?
Well, we know coming in, Trump and the Mala movement, and generally speaking, we say the state overall, because the machinery and the economic boom that is generated by the detention, deportation, business. It's an economic kind of endeavor. So this is not going to go anywhere anytime soon. You know, the $76 billion infusion. A lot of it is not just going to go into the federal agencies. It's going to go into the private sector. And so this is all a money-making machine that we're tired of people making money off of our back. So what we're doing is waging as best we can with the humble means that we can an organized resistance. So again, the reason we are doing this is because we're calling for the self-defense of our communities, because we knew that the type of actions were going to come our way, where they were going to do sweeps and full on just like capture, grab, kidnap, interrogate, coerce people to sign in these hidden kind of warehouses where they're taking people to. That's why the Guard is here. The Guard is not here to protect the federal buildings. They're here to protect these operations, military-style operations. Because remember, a lot of these agents and the folks that they got out of retirement, the mercenary types, they're all former active duty soldiers. And so there is a war going on against our people.
Chava, what's it like being on the streets? And the tear gas is going off. There's smoke everywhere. There's U.S. Marines in front of you, the National Guard. What is it like? Some people have called it chaos on the streets of Los Angeles. What was it like, and what's it been like when you have been there?
Well, there's a lot happening, but I'll take the example of what we're calling the Battle of Paramount and Compton, which was that early June action where community began alerting us that they were seeing U.S. Border Patrol in Paramount, which is just south of the city of Los Angeles, and the community, as they saw them, they were already tired of what was happening in the community with the sweeps and the pickups and the violent nature of how people were getting kidnapped. So they started protesting right at the gates of what essentially is a kind of like a warehouse area that the state has taken control over. Even today, as we speak, there's about 100 guards there. We believe that's one of their forward operating bases, where Greg Bovino might be there, or the other sub commander Kim is there. Like the commanders of these military attack people are situated in these places. So the way it looks is like this. The repelling of the protests. And we will tell you that the first violent act is always instigated by the state agents, whether they're with badges or lack thereof. They're the ones that come out and push and hit and provoke. So then that takes it up a notch, and then that day it was a 10-hour battle of back and forth, launching of tear gas and pepper balls, and we're in the thick of it. I was there from beginning to end. And actually, my vehicle was trapped on the other side of their line. I had to come the next day to go get my own vehicle. So it is very intense back and forth. And some people are taking it up a notch. What we're doing is documenting this abuse, because there will be a time of reckoning where these folks are going to have to face justice for this brutality and the war that they're waging here in Los Angeles. And attempting to crush this organized resistance as an example, because they really do want to export this into other cities, and they're already beginning to do that. It's happening already in Sacramento, Fresno, for example.
Chavo, let me ask you something, and to the people who may be watching, and a lot of them will not agree with what you're doing. They're going to say you are the instigators. You are creating this problem. How do you respond when people say that you're actually right now embellishing stuff? How do you justify what you're doing? Tell me why you believe that what you are doing is just.
Well, I can tell you on behalf of Union Barrio, we understand that there is a major contradiction that is occurring here. And with contradiction comes this friction, right, that we're seeing. And that contradiction is that we as Mexicanos are the indigenous people that have been traversing these territories for millennia. Then somebody just comes along and takes over, right, wages a war of occupation, and then causes illegals on our own lands. So that in and of itself is already the basis of the lands that we use. So any argument beyond that is like second to that central piece that we're advocating and like really pushing our political line. Because there will be one day where Mexicanos, indigenous people here in these territories do have more political economic power, and we will be changing the way society is run. So that is guaranteed. And so of course you may not agree. That's because maybe you've fallen into what we call the colonial mentality of like I'm like when people Mexicanos, Latino, Americanos, indigenous people join the ranks, for example, of these forces, that to us is a major contradiction. It's like you're going up against your own people. So this will all get sorted out through time, and we always think 7 generations ahead. So this moment in time that we're looking at is essentially one point in our historical timeline of resistance.
Chavo, quickly, how much longer can you keep this up? And I also wanted to ask you about the National Guard is apparently pulling out of Los Angeles. Your thoughts on that as well?
Well, on the question of the National Guard, like half, like 2,000 of them are being redeployed. We don't know if they're going to go quote unquote home or they're getting deployed to up north to Northern California, where there's a temporary restraining order that was issued by a federal judge last Friday that has limited the ability of these kidnappers to come in and openly do what they were doing for about a month and beyond. So that's one answer as far as the National Guard. And what was the second question?
The second question was about how long can you keep this up, the demonstrations?
I mean, for us, this is a lifetime commitment for us. So we're going to be around. We're not going to go anywhere. Actually, right now there's thousands of people that we've trained, and there's thousands more in line. Not only here in Los Angeles, so we're multiplying and quadrupling our efforts of self-defense because yes, there might be a temporary restraining order and things have lulled a little bit. The kidnappers are using different tactics like consensual encounters and things like that to try to get people. But I would say taxpayers around the U.S. You should be in an uproar. Right now, the state is spending $300,000 for every person that they're capturing and kidnapping of our people. That's $300,000 per person. And so that money is money that should be going into our social service net programs, education, healthcare, all these things that society really needs. So we're going to be around. We're going to keep this up. We're going to keep building. We're going to different parts of the state. We're also doing trainings online and phone calls. We're doing everything we can to prepare all the other communities that are bracing for what's to come. Because with this $76 billion infusion and 10,000 more kidnappers getting set on the loose, we have a lot more to go.
All right. Well,
thank you, Chavo, very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was Francisco Chavo Romero from the LA Unión del Barrio. Thanks for joining us today, sir. All right, folks, stay with us because we're going to take a quick break and we're going to bring Julian Resendez, our El Paso correspondent, in to talk with Sal about what's happening in California. And Julian is going to separate fact from fiction for us on our continuing coverage of the Bracero 2.0 program. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And welcome back to this Friday edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, and I am your host for this edition down here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley. And I wanted to bring in Julian Resendez now to continue that conversation that we were having before the break, Salvador, about L.A. And the protests happening there.
Yeah, definitely a much different situation here in West Texas as in California. First of all, we're not as big as Los Angeles or San Diego. So we have seen some limited movement. What we have seen for the most part has been targeted apprehensions of migrants. And let me tell you, there's just like there's activists in Southern California, there's activists here in El Paso who pretty much are alert, and they try to track the movements, any movements of Border Patrol, ICE, any of the federal agencies. So far, we haven't had what you would call raids, although we have had a couple of events that have pretty much scared the population in particular areas. One farm worker leader was just telling me that not more than a week ago in the Upper Valley, just across from the state line in New Mexico, there was a rumor that there would be a nice raid on a farm, on an onion farm. So very few people showed up the next day. Obviously, it turned out to be an erroneous tip, but it tells you about the environment of fear. Also, a couple of months ago, I covered an apprehension, an arrest of a smuggler in one of these suburban communities of El Paso. And although the target was a smuggler, several people in a shopping center were like scared to death of the presence of federal officers. one particular business that I made a point to get back to has not opened since then. So definitely there's an environment of fear, although there's no what you would call open rates going on here as far as we know. And the reason for that could be that we're a smaller community and the local leadership, from the county judge to the local congresswoman, not only are pretty united against what they call any arbitrary actions, but they're also in constant communication with federal law enforcement agencies, see what's going on, and to ask them to truly go after people that they have warrants against.
Mhm. Well, Julian, here in San Diego, for example, we haven't really seen any protests. There were also talks that they might also actually begin here in this area, but we have not seen them. They've been concentrated in the Los Angeles area, pretty much in the downtown central Los Angeles area. Chavo was telling us earlier that the demonstrations, its protests have been sporadically around Los Angeles, specific points, and but for the most part, they've been right in the heart of Los Angeles within about a 3-block area where they have county, state, and federal courthouses. So that's where the vast majority of the demonstrations have taken place. There's some talk that there are also demonstrations, protests planned for Fresno in the the San Joaquin Valley of California. We were hearing that they might also occur in Sacramento up to the north, California's capital. But still right now, as the last 6 weeks since June, for the most part, are exclusively have been taking place in Los Angeles.
And I just wanted to step in and say, you know, we haven't really seen much since that first week of initial protesting when all that happened, the No Kings protests, things like that. We haven't seen anything like that here in the Valley. We did report earlier this week, Jorge Vela, one of our reporters here at valleycentral.com in Harlingen, Texas, was talked to us about a couple different things that we have been seeing. The protests are kind of silent protests in a way. We've been seeing restaurants, different businesses, construction sites put signs up that say, you know, no ice allowed without a warrant, things like that. And, you know, the legality is, you know, it's kind of touchy. There's still a lot of questions as to whether, you know, ICE will respect that or not, you know. But same thing. It really does feel, as someone who lives in a smaller, more rural part of the country, and especially on the border. El Paso is a pretty big city. San Diego, obviously, one of the, you know, the top 20 cities in America size-wise, if not top 10. So, but LA, you know, you look at those cities that this administration has talked about in the past, you know, the very specific cities, and it almost feels like those cities specifically are being targeted.
And we did another story about it, another protest or an indirect protest where migrant workers, field workers have said that yesterday and today that they were going to go on strike. They were not going to report to work to pick the fruits or tend to the crops throughout California. They were also asking consumers to not buy produce, vegetables, meat, poultry products that might have been the result of undocumented hands. And they're saying this is another way they were hoping that the general public gets involved to drive a point home that migrant workers, undocumented workers, especially field workers, are essential workers in our society, and we should not be targeting them simply because they are undocumented.
Yeah, here in El Paso, we haven't seen any attempts to do a boycott or raise that issue. However, when I was in Dallas a few years ago, there were some similar events to make the population aware of the impact that immigrant workers have. It was called Day Without a Mexican about a decade ago, and we did see widespread no-shows at places of work. However, most of those places of work were already sensitive to the migrants because they're the ones that employ them. So the effect back then was also kind of limited.
There was also a movie with the same name, A Day Without a Mexican. Not the greatest film ever made, but it did make some valid points of what it would be like for our society not to have Mexicans or laborers, workers in our country, toiling, working, making our society better for everyone.
You know, and it's interesting you bring up the boycott of those industries. Again, to bring it back down here to the Rio Grande Valley, we're talking about those restaurants, something that it's in a way you could almost, it's an interesting because it's a protest in a way, but down here in South Texas, Texas, one of our state local workforce commission offices. That's the state jobs center. They're actually working with some of these restaurant owners now to staff up. And so it's interesting, but they're also, teaching folks the process of how, maybe they can get migrant workers on their payroll, things like that, how to do it effectively. And it seems like that's actually something that both sides of the aisle kind of are aiming to do with this new Bracero 2.0 program. We've talked a little bit about it, and we heard from Congresswoman Monica de la Cruz, who represents the 15th Congressional District in Texas. That's down here in South Texas. We heard from her earlier in the week about that program. But we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Julian, you're going to talk to us about that Bracero 2.0 program and hopefully dispel some myths and any misinformation that's out there. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. And welcome back to this Friday edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, and joining me now are San Diego correspondent Salvador Rivera and our El Paso correspondent Julian Resendez. Julian, we've been talking about this continuing coverage on the Bracero 2.0 program. There's a lot of questions still out there, but there's also a lot of answers that may not necessarily be correct. So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Let me tell you, when we heard about the introduction of this bill, obviously there was a lot of excitement because a lot of people on both sides of the aisle, a lot of Congress people, have been saying, okay, maybe the answer to illegal immigration is temporary work visas that eventually might lead to something else. So we check here in El Paso with one of the country's foremost experts in the Bracero program, because the Bracero 2.0 is supposed to be a continuation of the original Bracero program that ran from 1942 to 1964. And it was the temporary acquisition of Mexican labor to fill places in farms and ranches left by Americans who went off to fight in the Nazis in Europe, as well as the Japanese on the Pacific Ocean and those territories. So I consulted with this expert. His name is Carlos Marentes. He's the director of the Border Agricultural Farmer Center here in El Paso. And a couple of decades ago, he started a project called the Bracero Project. And what it was documenting the experiences of actual braceros, and braceros being Mexican labor temporarily imported to the U.S. to fill these vacancies in farms. It was highly successful. Over the course of those 2 decades, 4.5 million people came from Mexico to work in the United States. Eventually, obviously, they went back, but some of them, including some of our forefathers, found a way to parlay that into eventual temporary residence. Anyway, I talked to Mr. Marentes about Bracero 2.0, and I was shocked a little bit when he told me that, number one, it's a misnomer, and number two, it's probably going to do harm more than good. The reason is this. Bracero, like I said, was massive. 4.5 million people came across. This bill, according to Marentes, only expands a little bit the cap on the H-2A visa program, which are temporary farm workers. Also, right now, we took a deep dive into how much these workers are paid, these temporary workers. And depending on the state, wages range from $13.67 to almost $19 in places like California. What the bill proposes is to increase by $2 in comparison to the state minimum wage, the pay for the new braceros. So that would actually mean a pretty sizable pay cut. So obviously, this expert on the Bracero program is not happy with the bill.
Well, that's definitely something that a lot of folks maybe hadn't thought about. You only hear, an additional, dollar increase to the minimum wage, and you automatically assume it's going to be something positive.
Yeah, not only that, but also I've been checking into the Federal Register and other documents, and it's not just the people who reach up on the trees to get the oranges or stoop down to pull out the onions from the ground, potatoes, whatever. But it's also all those who work in sorting the crops before they get to the factories, and even some who who help with secondary handling of those products. So those people never were paid anywhere close to the minimum wage. And the reason that the wages are so high for H2A workers is that the federal government doesn't want to depress wages for the rest of us. In other words, if you bring in migrants and pay them less, then obviously everybody's going to want to pay less. So the wage needs to remain high, according to the federal government itself, for this program to work.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your reporting on that, Julian. We really appreciate it. Julian Resendes in El Paso. Salvador Rivera, thank you for joining us. And thank you at home for joining us as well. We'll see you on Monday on the next episode of Border Report Live. Make sure to check out borderreport.com for more. We'll see you then.